Starting off with a fan favorite, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I am using a few mods and a custom configuration. My config is basically default. It's 1x docked with FSR, and the system and CPU settings haven't been touched. And then for mods, I'm using the 60 FPS static mod. And then for fixes, I'm using anti-stropic fix. I probably butchered that name. And then disable quality reduction and then shadow resolution fix as well. And those just help with some of the graphical glitches. In this game, there is still some no matter what you do, unfortunately, with Ryujinx. And Ryujinx by far is the most sophisticated emulator for macOS, especially if you have an Apple Silicon chip. And so you're not going to get much better for graphical glitches that are still on par with this kind of performance. And so just bear that in mind when watching this. Another thing to note is I don't have Metal HUD enabled because with this 60 FPS patch, unfortunately, it just disappears. Can't do nothing about that, but here is some gameplay. Another thing to note if you decide to play this game on your Mac is that this game is heavily dependent on shader cache, and so this is one of the few games that I really notice when it's caching. Kind of annoying at the beginning, but once the initial animations of Link jumping, running, attacking things kind of work themselves out, it was at a pretty playable frame rate, and I am enjoying this. Off camera, I've been playing it, and it just looks absolutely amazing on this display. I did end up trying this on 2x resolution, but with the 60 FPS mod, I found only really the native resolution undocked would really work, but it would be fully playable, I think, with 30 FPS. It's just, I would much prefer to play with 60, so I'm fine with the 1x resolution. Next up is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at 2x resolution with FSR enabled. Now, the shader caches are really going to be noticeable in this game at the very beginning, and they'll work themselves out after you get a few laps in. Then they're not really noticeable, and the game is pretty smooth after that. But if you kind of want to avoid that, I would say stay at native resolution in docked mode just until you really feel like everything is smoothened out then, and then you can kind of up the resolution. That's what I did at least, and that's what I found was like the best for performance wise. And just as a quick side note, this does use JIT instead of hypervisor, so the performance is docked down quite a bit, but you still can get away with 2 and even 3 times resolution in some maps, absolutely no problem. Up for Switch is Castle Crashers Remastered at 3x resolution and FSR enabled. Now, I know this isn't a very performance intensive game, but this is just one of my absolute favorites from my childhood growing up with a PS3, and so I just kind of wanted to add this in as this is an amazing game. It runs amazing, looks beautiful. Just overall, this is an amazing game on the MacBook Pro M4, which it should be. It's a very old game, super easy to really run on almost anything nowadays, but still, absolutely amazing game. You should play it. Starting off for PC, we're going to be doing Grand Theft Auto 5 Legacy Edition, DXVK, and MSync. I will also be showing the settings in-game. And then here are my in-game settings for GTA 5. Now you can use auto for the graphic settings to get a much more smoother frame rate overall with no drops like I do. But this DXVK gives the most performance, and I don't really mind those slight freezes that you see every so often in the gameplay. So it's up to you, just whatever you prefer.
That's what this show's all about. The best music from all around the world, straight into your eardrum. Let's go, let's go!
Next up for PC is Sparking Zero. Now I'm using D3D Metal, default synchronization, and high resolution mode off. You can turn it on, but I just find that there's zero drops with high resolution mode with all high settings, so this is best for me. And then right at the beginning, right around here, you're going to notice some really big frame drops at the beginning when you first boot the game, and that's pretty normal. After my second or third boot, I really had no issues with it, and it ran completely fine.
I'm Vegeta, Kakarot together. Yes, that makes me Vegeta. And this, I'll give you something good. Get ready for this. It's Super Vegeta. What the hell is this? Just what are you? Let's do this! What's wrong? Alright! Shall I get serious? Take this!
Next up is PS3 emulation, specifically Skate 3 at 1080p. I'm using Ps3, and I'm just going to note real quick that the ARM build sucks on the M4. I don't know what's going on. Well, I do know, but I don't know why. The SPU scheduler built in to macOS itself doesn't work very well with Ps3 with the M4. For some reason on my M2 Air, it ran arguably better on the ARM port. I don't really know what's going on with that, or if it's an issue with Ps3 or it's a macOS issue itself, but I would avoid the ARM port with an M4 right now and just use the universal macOS build. it yields much better performance. On the ARM build, I could barely reach over 40 FPS, and with the universal one, I can easily get over 110. It's just, I've locked it at 60 because it seems the most consistent and most reminiscent to the actual PS3 gameplay I grew up enjoying. Last but certainly not least is PS2 emulation. Now I'm doing 6 times the native resolution or 4K with blending accuracy on high. I'm doing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 to start with, and this runs absolutely amazing. You are going to see some slight stutters, and that's just a recording issue. I'm not sure why that was showing up. I think it was just a slight hiccup within Mac OS. But for me, I didn't experience any of those little drops and freezes that you might see, so you should just disregard those. This game runs perfect. We also have God of War 2 running at the same resolution as Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. All of the PS2 games that I'll be showing are going to be running at 4K. There's no real reason not to. It runs absolutely fine. Fans don't pick up, and CPU's handling just fine. So everything's going to be at 4K.
Show no mercy!
And the very last title that I'll be going over is Burnout 3 Takeover, one of my all-time favorite PS3 games just in general. This is running at 4K resolution with color blending set to high. This runs and looks absolutely amazing. And the only thing that I will say is that there is some slowdowns, and they are noticeable slowdowns at 4K resolution when you're first starting in, especially with a new map or anything, or lots of terrain. And so I'd stay at a lower resolution just until everything caches in and you've loaded everything. But other than that, it is amazing. What I'm going to be going over next is kind of just some software limitations that I've found and what we can kind of expect in the future. So for Switch emulation, Ryujinx, specifically Ryu Bing, the updated fork of Ryujinx, that has unfortunately had some DMC takedowns and issue with GitHub. Now, I have heard that they are going to be moving over to a different website that is protected from that, but the actual development for that emulator doesn't seem great for the future, but I am having hopes for what it can do for now. PS3 emulation as a whole is in a pretty rough state in terms of macOS, specifically the ARM build, just because that's so new and hasn't really been fleshed out yet by the developers. It's just not yielding as much as performance as these chips can really get. Now, older chips like the M1 and M2 and even M3 can utilize it much better, but for some reason the M4, and I'm not technically advanced enough to really understand why, but the M4 is having a lot of trouble with the ARM build, so I would really prefer and suggest if you went to the Mac OS Universal build. There's lots of it all over the website, and you can also find repositories from their direct GitHub, just in case you want an older one for whatever reason. They're all there. I did test a lot of other PC games, but unfortunately not a lot of them boot. I do a lot of that stuff kind of on my Android tablet, and so I had a lot of games to be able to test, like Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, and Black Ops 3. I had Call of Duty Warfare 3. I had the original Call of Duty. I had Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, lots of older games and some newer ones as well, but they have a lot of issues, specifically with Vulkan. Like Doom 2016, Molten VK doesn't have the right parameters to be able to run that game yet, and so I think that will be fixed in the future, but for right now, there's a lot of games that are pretty popular and would run really, really well on this silicon, but just aren't able to due to Molten VK. Another issue that I had found, or less so of an issue and more of just a complaint, is that Crossover has a lot of issues running games off a external hard drive, so I did have to put all the files into my actual MacBook, which makes sense and is the optimal way to play games, but I was hoping that I could at least test if they were bootable before I had to transfer the files. So that's kind of just a small complaint that I had, and if you use an external drive, that's probably something you would want to know. And a lot of Rockstar games like Red Dead Redemption 1, Red Dead Redemption 2, and GTA 5, they all have this weird lighting issue where the sun really likes to blur up like you're looking at a really, really close-up reflection in some spots. I'm not really sure why that is, but that's kind of became recent in a recent Crossover update, and so we should see that fixed in the near future. I think the M4 Pro is the most cost-effective option if you're looking for a good new MacBook to be able to get work, school, and some really heavy emulation and translation gaming done. Purely because the M4 base model, the GPU cores really is where it disappoints, and that's where it really is a necessity for emulation and stuff like that, as well as the extra RAM can absolutely help with the 24 gigabytes instead of the regular 16. Now, I'm not saying 16 isn't enough. You can absolutely get all of this done with 16 gigabytes, but I would prefer 24 just so you can really reach the top of that and maybe upscale a little bit more. And why I say that over a M4 Mac Mini or maybe even an M4 Max is that they just both have pros and cons that I would not personally want to take. The M4 Pro or the M4 Max obviously being the price. Of course, I would want the extra GPUs that it hands over, but it's really not necessary in a lot of games. Really, a lot of stuff is software locked, not hardware locked. In a few years, the M4 is probably going to be able to outperform what I have now, and it's just a matter of time before the software itself catches up. The M4 Mac Mini is just not really an option for me, just because I need this to be able to be portable, and the built-in screen, everything else, it just really works out best for me. The price is an absolute steal right now, especially if you can get a student discount. And so if you're tight on money and the M4 Pro is not something that you really can afford right now, the M4 Mac Mini is an absolute great option for that. I would suggest some YouTube videos. I can put those in the description. But really, those are my two biggest concerns about that, as well as cooling. So obviously the M4 Max is going to have on par cooling to the M4 Pro, but it is going to run hotter just because it's utilizing more cores, and so there's not a lot of throttling that I've seen with the Pro. Really the only thing that really has an issue is GTA 5 with that. Keep in mind this is based off my own experimentation and my own opinion, and so I could be wrong and not really agree with what is factually out there, and so I would take everything that I've said with a grain of salt and really do your own research. Don't take away what you find from YouTube videos. Look at benchmarks, cross-reference videos, and really just do your own research. One last thing before the video ends, I would not suggest the M4 Air, simply because if you want to emulate it, that thing is going to throttle so bad. The M4 already runs hot enough as it is in the MacBook Pro, and without any proper cooling, that thing is just going to bake in there. I would really not get the M4 Pro unless you're doing some more heavy duty working and maybe some schoolwork. Emulation is kind of just out of the question. Well, not out of the question, just not as optimal for the M4. I would go get a used M2 Pro or maybe even an M3 Pro. And that concludes the end of the video. If you had found this helpful or you noticed anything that was wrong, please feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm always willing to learn and to correct where I can. That being said, I would like to just reiterate that this is just a hobby channel. This is just my opinion, and I would not base anything that I say off of fact. And I don't want anyone to come into the comment section feeling offended or upset that I had said something about their hardware or I had said something wrong or misrepresented it. I'm just some dude on YouTube. Alright? Correct me. I absolutely want you to. You don't gotta be a dickhead. Please. Love you guys.